everyone, my name is Michelle White, and in this tutorial we're going to do a deep dive into the actual layout editor. Now I'm not going to build every single widget, only because those steps are going to be the same for each widget. Keep in mind too is that in this tutorial I am going to start at sort of just a basic level, and then I'm just going to keep adding different layers to it. One thing we always encourage you guys is that do not feel like overwhelmed or feel like this is too complicated. If you get stuck, please give us a call. Let us walk you through it. Let us sort of guide you to learn the layout editor. Now really I like to break this down into 3 sections, okay? The first section is creating a zone, the second section is adding a widget, and then the third section is styling it. But of course where most people kind of get stuck is understanding basically all the widgets we provide and just kind of what they do, what their sort of purpose is. But then the third part, or the second part I should say, is just the templates itself. We offer a lot of templates within each widget, and sometimes we have clients that are like, okay, I have this, I have this look, I have this vision, how do I accomplish it, what template should I grab? So again, you guys, we're not going to dig into all of that because there's tutorials on each widget. Today is really just going to be a complete overview so you completely understand the layout editor. So let's go ahead and get started. So as you guys can see, I'm in the layout editor application, and I'm going to go ahead and hit create new layout. And then for this particular tutorial, I'll just call it Michelle Test. And then right away, I'm going to click 1920 by 1080. Now this is sort of a default setting. Anytime we are creating our backgrounds, this is that size. Of course, if you had like a vertical or a video wall, that size is definitely going to change. But as you can see, you can clearly just type it in, or we just have some quickly ready to go buttons. All right, so again, 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to hit create layout. Now, as this is sort of kind of bringing us into the back end, we create all our backgrounds in Photoshop. Now, that does not mean that you need to have Photoshop and that you need to sort of create these. This is something that we too provide, and we only use Photoshop because it allows us to use different filters. It really allows us to customize your layout to fit your branding. I've definitely had clients who've used Illustrator or have used even PowerPoint. The big thing is that the system just can only sort of take PNG or JPEG files. All right, so as you can see, you guys, we're in the back end here. So as I said, this is 3 steps. The first step is creating a zone, the second step is adding the widget, and the third step is styling it. So in the top right here, we have zones, new zones, preview, and configure. So I'm going to cover all this, but right away, let's just go ahead and start building. So we're going to hit new zone, and now it's asking for the zone name. So I always encourage everyone just to name your zone name, whatever the widget is. So if you're doing a weather, if you're doing a time, if you're doing a background, social media, I just encourage everyone to do that, because once you start to have multiple widgets in here, it kind of helps just visually when you come in, you sort of just instantly know what zone is what. All right, so I click background here. And then at this point, I actually already know what size I want this to be. And the reason why is obviously because it's the size of my screen. So I'm going to type in 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to hit submit close. Now already step 1 is done. And as you can see, the zone has been created. And when I hover over, I do see the background, which I've established. So that's kind of, again, why I sort of encourage everyone to name their zone of whatever that widget is. We do have some sort of functionalities up here where you can zoom, if you want to zoom in, if you want to zoom out, up, down. And then we'll kind of cover over the show zone preview in just a sec. All right, so the second step now is to add the widget. So I guess how do I do that, right? So I can do it in 2 ways. The first way is I can just come in here and I can just double click into the zone, which brings me into sort of this moto or sort of this pop-up. Otherwise, another way, you guys, is we do have some icons here. And the third one in will bring me into as well. So either option's fine. You'll sort of see me double click. That's just sort of the way I've taught myself. And then up here, you guys, it says add widget. Now these are all the widgets that we sort of provide. And I will cover all of these. For right now, we're just going to kind of keep sort of moving this tutorial along. Towards the end, you guys, though, I will sort of give you a rundown of exactly what these are. So as I said, we create our backgrounds in Photoshop. And the system only accepts JPEG or PNG files. So therefore, I am going to tackle this widget called graphic. Now, what I always tell people is that when they grab widgets, to always start from their left and work their way right. As you can sort of see these tabs here, widget info, graphic settings. Now, some widgets, there's a little bit more sort of configuration that goes with them. So they might have more tabs. As you can see, this one's pretty easy because we only have 2. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the second one. And now it says graphics settings. So I can simply just click in here, which will open up my desktop. Otherwise, what I can do, you guys, is I can just sort of move my, my screen over here and simply just drag something in. All right, so as that loads up, it gives me my name, gives me a nice little preview, and now really that widget's already done. So I'm gonna hit OK. So as you can see now, we do have some more sort of data that's being provided. As I click on that zone, it is telling me the name of it, X, Y, Z. This will all come in handy when we build another widget. Now, one thing to sort of keep in mind as well is that it sort of helps to see your background when you're building these widgets. And so that's where that show zone preview comes in, which will show you the background. So now we can add another widget and we can sort of see as we move that zone around or move that widget around, we'll be able to sort of physically see where we want it. So let's go ahead and build another widget. And then that's where I'm going to start to now kind of deep dive and kind of keep adding levels to it. So again, 3 steps. Add the zone, add the widget, and style it. So we're going to go back up here to new zone, and let's do time and date. We're going to hit next. All right, so now it's asking for the width and height. Well, at this point, I really have no idea how big or small I want to make this. But the zone can't get created or get generated until you put some sort of number in. And I'm not too sure why, but for whatever reason, 100 by 100 has always just been my default. And then again, you guys, I'm gonna hit submit close. So as you can see, now this zone is right in here, and already I can move this, right? I can make it long, I can make it bigger or tall. If I simply move it, you can see my mouse is changing. I can move this over here. You can also see that I can come in here as well and then just manually enter my numbers in. It's really whatever's, works for you and your sort of workflow and what you're used to. But again, I'm just gonna sort of eyeball it right up in this corner. Now, one thing a lot of people forget is this z-index. So anytime we build a widget, we want to make sure the z-index is set to 1. Now, that doesn't mean that if I say, let's just say I add another widget and it's a weather, it doesn't mean that that needs to be at 2. And then if I add another one, that needs to be at 3. They all just need to be set to 1 because the system needs to sort of know, okay, what is the background and what are the widgets sitting on top? And so that's kind of one thing that a lot of people just kind of miss. So make sure that anytime you add more widgets, that z-index is being changed to 1. And again, your background is being set to 0. Now, as you can see, you guys, I kind of moved around. So as you sort of select different zones, things sort of come forward, and it might be sort of hard to sort of re-grab that zone right here. Again, that was my time and date. That's where this guy kind of comes in handy. This is a full list of everything you've created, every zone you've created. It allows you sort of to clearly just tackle that particular one. Again, it comes in handy when we have a lot of widgets. Again, in this tutorial, we only have 2 going on. All right, so here we go, you guys. Again, step 1 was already done. I created the zone. So I need to add that widget again. And again, I can just double click right in here, and I can come up here and hit add widget. So down here in the kind of the bottom right, that's where the time and date is. And then as I said earlier, you're going to start from your left and you're going to work your way right. Now we will sort of dig into the widget infos, don't worry. But again, we're just going to keep moving on with the tutorial. So we're going to jump right to the second one. Now we're going to start to configure this particular widget. So I'm just going to kind of quickly do it. I'm going to do here, we're Central Time. I'll do month, date, and year, which is great. And then there are no templates for this particular widget. But if there were, you would have a list right down here, and we actually provide a little thumbnail so you can just sort of understand what that template's gonna look like. All right, so as you guys can see right here, this is the name and the selectors, of course. Just kind of like a Word doc, you can simply click bold, or you can sort of have it all capitalized. You can select a font. Right here, as you can see, you can change the size, you can change the color. Otherwise, if you guys do know CSS and there's something that you want to do to that particular, I guess selector is really the terminology we call it. But if to sort of say it in a different way, if there's some CSS that you want to use on the time and date, you can clearly come in here and just sort of freestyle exactly how you want it to look. I kind of spelt that wrong, so let's try that again. All right, perfect. And as you can see, it is representing in this window. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And now I want to preview this, okay? So I've made this font 40. I've given it a font size. I gave it a color. How do I preview it on the background? So what I'm going to do is up here in the top right, I'm going to hit the preview button. All right, and as you can see, you guys, here is my time and date widget. Now it is kind of jumping down to another line. That's great. I can make this bigger again. I can make whatever modifications I want. But I'm going to keep this here because, again, in this tutorial, I'm just going to now keep adding different levels to it so you guys can understand how sophisticated we can take a particular widget. So I'm going to X out of here. And now let's just say you're like, okay, Michelle, this is great. I love it. But the red on the purple background, it's a little too hard to read. I want to make the background yellow, or I want to make the background white. Now there's two ways we could do that, right? We could go back into our Photoshop file. I could sort of eyeball, where I want this white background, and I could re-import it in. Now the only kind of flip side of that is that anytime I move my time and date, I have to keep going back and forth to that Photoshop file. But if I put it in the actual zone, okay, like again, in the actual zone, anytime I move this, that white background is staying consistent. It's sort of following it. And so that's sort of where it brings us into these icons here. Now the first icon right here is a copy function, which is great if you have multiple layouts, because if you get sort of one widget, like again, time and date, you're like, oh my gosh, that is so awesome, it looks great. You could sort of copy the widget, go into another layout and just paste it right in. Just like a nice little shortcut to sort of save you some time. The settings icon is exactly where we're gonna go, but I'm just gonna skip it for just a second. The third one in, which you saw me earlier, that sort of brings us into the widget gallery or the widget page. There's an X button, of course, that probably means delete. And then right up here, there's a little box that's kind of hidden, but this actually locks the zone. So when you are in the layout editor and you're dealing with multiple zones, as you can see, you guys, we don't have sort of an undo. So you can go ahead and lock the zone. That way you don't accidentally hit one and bump it up or bump it to the left. So that's kind of a nice little hidden figure or hidden trick right there. But we're going to dig into the settings. Now the settings of this has to do with the zone. It has everything to do around the widget. To sort of maybe explain this in a different way is that you're basically putting a widget is going into a div. And I apologize if sort of I'm losing you, but for some of our users who understand CSS and HTML, I am going to sort of explain it in a different way here. So what happens, you guys, is when you create a zone, you're creating a div. And when you take that widget and you add it into it, anything in the settings here, this is going to be everything outside the div. So if you wanted rounded corners, if you wanted a stroke around there, if you wanted the background to be yellow, that's all within the div. Now you can do it within the widget as well, but really we want to tackle everything outside the zone. All right, you guys, so that was kind of my advanced version there. So we'll kind of bring it back down to better explain. So yes, let's just say, for instance, I have my time and date. You guys saw the red background, or sorry, the red text on the purple. And you say, okay, Michelle, that's way too hard to read. I want to put a white background on there. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to tackle in the settings icon, and we're going to jump right into the background default. Now this is where I can simply just type in the color. Any rainbow color will read. Otherwise, you guys can see we're getting this color picker where you can sort of choose. The part right here is actually transparent. So maybe you don't want it at like 100%. You want it at like 50 or 30. Again, I'm going to kind of make this kind of ugly. But let's just say we're going to do a light sort of teal background. That's how you would establish this. Otherwise, you guys can throw even another image in there. Now let's just hit save, and we're going to preview so we can sort of view this. All right, so as you guys can see, this is sort of my background color. And again, to bring it into sort of that higher level, as you can see, our div does have that background color tied to it. So let's say now you're like, okay, Michelle, this is great, but I want a stroke now. Or like I want a white border that goes around it because again, maybe I have a white border here, I've got sort of a white border here. I kind of want to match that. Again, it has to do with the zone. It has nothing to do with the widget. We're sort of referring to everything outside of that. So again, what we're going to do, guys, we're going to go back into the settings and we're going to tackle the tab called Style. Now this is where you can do 100% CSS. Let's see if I get this right the first time. I might get it wrong. But this is where you could do 100% CSS of whatever you want that zone, or another term, div, to sort of represent. So let's go ahead and hit preview. All right, so I did my CSS right, and you can see that we do have now a border. So a couple other things too, you guys, just to kind of dig into the settings here. I kind of skipped over right away, but this is where you could change the zone name. So maybe, you start out with time and date and then later you're like, oh, I want to put social media. As I said in the beginning, it kind of helps to sort of always keep your known names consistent. So this is where you could just come in and do, social media. Again, with height, X, Y, that's all being established right here, but you're also getting that input or that information. Policy, default, Y, fade in, we'll talk about in just a second. All right, so I'll just hit save. A couple things up here too, you guys. So you did see that this is sort of the running list of all the zones you have. This is how we create a new zone. You saw me preview it. And then configuration is how you actually change the name of the layout. So eventually if you're like, oh my gosh, Michelle's test is is terrible. I want to change it to Michelle's tutorial. Or you know what, we had this screen hanging up horizontal, it's now vertical. This is how you would sort of change that particular information. All right, so let's go ahead and dig into some more settings here. So I'm going to double click in here and let's kind of tackle all the different widgets and sort of get a rundown of exactly what each one is. So the first one, as you can see, is called an announcement. Now, the best way to think of that is sort of your playlist. Anything you upload into this left side where it says announcements, this is sort of the widget you would want to use. That's how they sort of connect. An announcement is a playlist. It's a series of assets that you upload into the system, whether it's videos, YouTubes, JPEGs, PowerPoints. You basically create your own playlist or loop of assets or content or media library. There's a lot of different terminology there, but essentially that would be the widget to use that. Calendar widget, that would be something, again, you can sort of see on the left side here, we have an application called Calendar. Now, Calendar can be sort of two things. One is you can come into our system and you can manually put your information in for the next, 6 months, 8 months, a year. Or some people have integrations. Integrations as Google Calendar, Outlook, EMS. Of course, those are just some of the ones that come off the top of my head. Third one over here is called content. So we actually provide content types. As you can see, we have a good selection here. I think there's about 15 in here. And I'll just kind of give you a visual of what they look like. So we provide this information for you for free. Again, you guys can customize this look however you want. But this is sort of what it looks like as a default. And the idea of that is that it sort of cycles through every 10 to 15 minutes. It will sort of show the latest 5 most recent posts. So if it's CNN, it's whatever sort of hit the biggest news within the last, like I said, 10, 15 minutes. Add widget down here, you guys, we have a counter. So again, days to last accident, or maybe you want to count down until Black Friday or to Christmas, or birthday. That would be sort of what this widget would do. Custom HTML. So custom HTML could be maybe, sometimes I've used it to pull in like YouTube playlists. Or sometimes if someone wants something kind of weird, maybe with their website, I'll use a custom HTML. If we're building sort of custom templates for you, we'd obviously use that. You guys did see me use Graphic. I use that mainly for the background. Iframe, again, I could use YouTube as an example, where I could just iframe something in. Website's always a good example as well. Label is basically like a title. So maybe if you have a schedule and on top of the schedule you want to say upcoming events. Again, we could put it on the background, but we can also put it within sort of our CMS. Scores, I'll just kind of give you guys a visual. And kind of like I said earlier, guys, a lot of these widgets do have templates, so you can get sort of a visual of what these templates are going to look like. But this is our sports scores here. And basically this cycles through the latest, as you can see, these are your choices if you want all of them, if you want to pick and choose. But it will show you the upcoming games, and then it will show you, last night's games and the scores. Social media, of course, you can do Facebook, you can do Twitter, you can do Instagram Business. So that's how you'd sort of get your social media. Ticker would basically scroll across the bottom. I guess it doesn't have to scroll across the bottom. That's just where most people put it. But some people might want like CNN or like ESPN to sort of scroll across. Again, you guys can also do your own information, which we call it a custom ticker, where again, you're going into the system, you're manually putting your information in, and then that's sort of populating it on the screen. Time and date, you guys saw me do that. And then of course we do have a weather widget. Let's kind of tackle the graphs and forms. So we do have one called List. Now it is an application, you can kind of see it on the left side here. It's called Data List. Where List gets basically used a lot is mainly like directories, where it's like, okay, I have the building name on the left and then the room, on the right. Menu boards is a great example as well, where it's like, okay, I have the menu, I have the price, and then I have the calories. Another one is a good one that we use List for is any like Excel uploads for like corporate companies. Maybe they have like shift changes or they just have some, I guess data or corporate information they want to put. They'll upload an Excel file into our data list, and then this is sort of where we'll populate. Third one over here, we have a video stream. So of course you guys can video stream, YouTube links, or if you guys have like any HLS links, this would be the particular widget that we would want to sort of focus on. And then we have some premium widgets. Premium widgets are widgets that you sort of have to pay for. One is a traffic map, and actually one that's not here was actually a weather radar. So these would be some widgets that you would need to pay for, but we do provide them for you. All right, so let's kind of tackle sort of these widget type information here. So I am just going to add just a quick sort of another widget just so I can do a better job explaining here. So sometimes when we create zones, every zone is given a timeline. And as a default, you guys, that timeline is 60 seconds. Now we can change that to whatever we want. And I guess how do we change that? If we kind of go back into our settings, right? Now we're tackling that zones. This is where you could change the policy. Now keep in mind it is seconds, okay? But as a default, you're gonna get a timeline of 60 seconds. And where would I sort of use that? A lot of times when we start utilizing the timeline is when we have multiple widgets. So as you can see, I can continue to add widgets on here. Where I see this being used the most would be social media. Some people will want sort of a zone created, and then they'll want their Facebook and their Twitter and their Instagram, and they'll just basically want that to rotate or sort of toggle through. That is where we would start to utilize the timeline. Now, as you can see, you guys, in this tutorial, I'm not going to add another social media because I think I can explain this pretty well without setting up sort of a better scenario. But when you have multiple widgets, one thing you can do is you can sort of come in here and label these. Again, it's super small, doesn't need to happen, but if you're sort of in the layout editor a lot, it's just a nice visual for you to come in, click on the zone, and be like, okay, yep, I've got time, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Again, you don't need to do it, but that's sort of what it's for. We do have some settings here, right? So we have the order, which maybe I want to change the order. So maybe I want Facebook to go first and then time to go second. We have some priority and saturations. So I am just simply going to tell you guys to basically ignore those settings. We have a widget in here that you cannot see. It is for sort of a different side business that we have, and those two functionalities only pertain to that one widget. And I know it's kind of confusing to sort of see it there because obviously, you want to play with it. But just to ignore or to avoid any stress, just go ahead and ignore these two fields. Now we have, though, duration. So what if you say, all right, Michelle, time is showing up, but it's just way too quick. Like it doesn't give anybody enough time to sort of even see the time. This is where you could come in and start utilizing the duration, where you say, all right, I'm going to have time show up on my display for 30 seconds, and then I'm going to have Facebook show for 10. Again, you can change the 60 seconds if that's not enough time for you. All right, so I'm just going to change this back. All right, so then now we have a couple other ones. So filler kind of does the math for me, okay? So if I have 60 seconds and I have 2 in here, I bet we can guess that if this is 10 seconds, this is probably 50 seconds. But I'm too lazy, I don't want to do the math, so therefore I'm just going to select filler, okay? So that's just kind of a nice little shortcut. Repellent, now where repellent comes into play, and maybe this is going to be a little confusing, but I will do my best to explain it. Where we use repellent is when you only have 2 announcements in a timeline. Okay, so keep in mind, announcements are playlists, right? These are 2 separate playlists that have different content. And right now, if I don't have the repellent on, what's going to happen is this announcement's going to play for a little bit, and then this announcement's going to play for a little bit, and then this one, and then this one. But if I turn the repellent on, it forces it to play 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1 here. It sort of forces it to do that like 1-1 ratio. And so really the only time I've used repellent is when I'm dealing with that situation. Now override, where override comes into play, and this is a great example as well, is let's say we have an announcement. Again, announcements your playlist, you've got videos, PowerPoints, JPEGs, whatever. You've got everything kind of cooking in here. And then you have a calendar. But not every day do you have events going on. So what's going to happen is, as a default, it's going to show your announcement, and then it's going to flip to an empty calendar that has nothing in there. And then it's going to flip to your announcement and then flip to a calendar. That might look a little tacky, right? On your digital signage, you just got this blank spot. You're like, oh my gosh, that looks ugly. So where we can utilize override is so we can turn that on. That way what happens is the system will basically communicate like this. It will say, okay, here's my announcement. I'm going to flip to the calendar. Oh, wait, I don't have anything. I'm going to keep playing announcement. I'm going to keep playing announcement. And then when the next day came, if it wants to sort of flip again, it'd be like, oh, hey, we've got events. Now I need to sort of rotate. I need to sort of share this time with that calendar. So that would be the situation where we would use override. All right, so I believe I've sort of covered everything within the layout editor. Do you have any questions? Definitely give us a call. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you.